Welcome to Glioblastoma AKA GBM, a podcast brought to you by the Glioblastoma Research Organization, highlighting stories of GBM warriors, caregivers, medical advisors, and more. Join us this season as we connect with members of our incredible community and have meaningful and insightful chats regarding all things glioblastoma. Please note that any information provided on the show is not meant to treat, diagnose, or prevent any disease, and all information that is discussed in our conversation is what worked for the individual themselves and should not be taken as advice. The information provided on this show is not a substitute for professional medical advice, and you should contact your medical provider and healthcare team with any questions. Sadaf Chaudry, welcome to Glioblastoma AKA GBM. I'm so excited to be here with you today and talk about your story and your experience.
Well, thank you for having me, Amber. It's so lovely to finally meet you.
Absolutely. Everyone that doesn't know you, who is Sadaf?
I'm a mother first. I'm an accountant, and I have my own personal blog, Being Sadaf, where I discuss all of my issues and I talk about taboo issues within our Pakistani society. And I've touched on grief and my husband's illness a lot.
And I know that you worked for NTV Houston. Is that where you had met Rehan?
No, that was something I did on the side for myself.
Okay.
While working as an accountant. I've always worked as an accountant. And I did NTV because I've always wanted to be, and it's going to sound funny, on TV or a talk show host or an actress.
I started a podcast. It doesn't sound funny at all. I was like, okay, how can we do good for society and also have fun? So here we are.
Yes, exactly. I know.
It.
And I feel like I have too many thoughts and I'm very bold. So we should be out there helping others.
Absolutely. And so, going back, how did you and Rehan meet?
One of my really good friends, Seema Malik, I grew up with her here in Cincinnati. Her husband, Jawad, grew up with my husband, Rehan. So when he moved to Chicago, he was just a young producer at Fox. And they called me and they're like, hey, we met your future husband. And it just happened from there.
What did you think of when someone told you they met your future husband?
Oh, I told her, yeah, I'm going back to sleep. Please leave me alone. But she actually forced me to email him and contact him because she said, I told him not to call you, not to email you. You will make the first move. So I made the first move. I emailed him just saying, hey, how are you? My friend said that.
You emailed him?
Yeah.
Super formal.
Super formal. Okay. But he didn't like my email because I said, my friend Seema said, I need to email you. What is your story? And he thought I was very arrogant and rude in my email. But I'm like, hey, I caught your attention.
Yeah.
So.
And then from there,
we just started talking. And that was March of 2007. We started talking. Then we met in May. And after May, we saw each other every weekend. Our parents really didn't know about it. But yeah, we saw each other every weekend after that.
And was he working for ABC at the time?
No, he was working for Fox 32, WFLD in Chicago. And I still remember I was driving and he asked me, he's like, can you pick me up at the corner of Randolph and Michigan? And I'm like, okay, what a weird date. So I drove and
That was your first date?
That was our first date.
Okay.
I stopped and he opened up the car door from the passenger side and he stuck out his hand. He said, hi, I'm Rehan. And I said, I'm Sadaf. I was awkward because I'm always awkward. But he was so kind and nice and he was so handsome.
That you got married. And so when you continued your relationship and then you obviously had your son who is now almost turning 11 years old, how, the beginning of his glioblastoma diagnosis, what was that like?
Oh God, it was horrible. I still remember when my son was actually with my parents over the summer. I was working, my husband was working because he was VP of ABC New York. So I'm like, okay, we don't have time for Rafi over the summer. I don't want to ruin his summer. He told me, he's like, I can't see left. And I have this really splitting headache. And the funny part is I was having a photo shoot that day. And I really wanted him to be part of it. And he's like, I can't be part of your photo shoot.
What was your photo shoot for?
It was blogging, being a blogger in New York City now and how my life transitioned, right? So, and I had all these really nice Pakistani designer outfits and they're so over the top. You should go on my blog and check it out. And I really wanted to advertise them. So I was doing this beautiful shoot and I wanted my husband to be part of it. He said, I can't. I have this really horrible headache on my right side and I suffer from migraines. So I gave him a sumatriptan. I'm like, this will help. He took it and nothing happened. So the whole day he just laid in bed. After the photo shoot, everything was over. I called my sister. She's an internist. And she freaked out because they have heart disease in their family. And she's like, there's like a major vessel that's connected to the heart. He needs to go to the hospital. He didn't listen. Mm-hmm. The next day was Sunday. And he finally was like, all right, let's go to brunch. We went to brunch. And I forget where. It was in Upper East Side. We went to brunch. And afterwards, he said, I want to buy a Montclair jacket. We went in. He bought one for himself and for our son. And he never buys himself anything expensive. Mm-hmm. He usually is just like, thinks about it for like days, but he bought it on the spot. And he said, I wish Rafa would come home. I'm really missing him. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, my head is hurting still. I'm going to go back to bed. Mm-hmm. The next day he was supposed to go give us talk at Princeton University with one of the anchors, Chaudry. When he went to work, they said, you're slurring your words. We think you're having a stroke. He was rushed to this is the funny part. He went on his scooter to Mount Sinai West. And he thought he was this really cool hip guy, like got this, you know. So he took his scooter.
Like the electronic scooters, I'm guessing.
Yes, okay. The electronic scooter. He was so lazy. We lived three like blocks away from work. But he took his scooter to Mount Sinai West. I was working, and he said, hey, they think I'm having a stroke. I like shut my laptop and I ran up the street. Mm-hmm. And by then, they'd already expedited everything because like ABC had called in. We got really, really lucky. He was... they had put in the IV and he was going in for a CT with contrast. And I was like, oh, we'll finally find out, you know.
What's going on?
He took Claritin D every single day that I've been married to him. He always said he had sinuses and I never believed it. So I'm like, I'll finally find out if you have sinuses. So we had no idea what was happening. Then we were just sitting there waiting. And he told me, he's like, hey, the nurse was really funny with me and laughing. But as soon as after my scan, she got serious. And I'm like, oh, you're just being paranoid. So then we were sitting in a room, private room, and neurosurgery, a resident came down to talk to us. And I didn't really know what was going on. She was trying to explain something to me. And the attending walks in and he's like, hey, did they tell you about your scans? And he's like, no. He's like, well, you know, I'm off in 10 minutes. So I just want to let you know, you have a mass bigger than a golf ball, smaller than a tennis ball. I'm so sorry.
What?
I started crying. I was bawling. And my husband was like, what? And then the neurosurgeon resident was like, I'm so sorry. This is not how you break news.
She said that to the doctor?
To us.
Yeah.
And she told him to leave.
Wow.
And then she's like, I'm going to give you guys a minute. And then at that time, we were like, what the heck could it be? Then I started Googling. I was like, you know, maybe it's like a meningioma, hemangioma. Mm-hmm. And, you know, gliomas freaked me out because, you know, Beau Biden and Senator John McCain, you know, we read all about it, but we never really, it's not like one of those cancers that you hear people dying from. I called my family, everything, all that happened. Then he had a surgery. Well, we met with the doctor the next day, and it was Dr. Gatan. He's amazing at Mount Sinai West. And he took us upstairs and he said, hey, you know, I just want to let you know, you have a tumor. We're going to get it out. The thing is, you'll never be able to drive again. And I didn't understand that. The thing is, the tumor was already chewing up his left optic nerve. Mm-hmm. So he could never see left again. And he had tunnel vision in his left eye. And he was like, you know, we're going to try to get it out. We don't know what it is right now. And then once he got it out, he came home 2 days later. There was an anchor in Atlanta, Jovita Moore, who was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme. Mm-hmm. And my husband jumps out of bed and he's like, call the doctor. What if I have GBM? I'm like, you don't have GBM. Mm-hmm. He's like, no, what if I have GBM? So I called the doctor because the doctor was so cool. He gave me his personal cell phone. He's like, Sadaf, why are you calling me on a Sunday? We have an appointment tomorrow. I'm like, well, Jovita Moore, an anchor in NBC Atlanta, has GBM. My husband wants to know, does he have GBM? And he's like, is he related to her? I'm like, no. He's like, well, her illness is her own. So he didn't want to tell me. We went in the next day. He avoided every possible way of saying GBM.
Really?
He did. He just did not want to say it.
Why do you think that is?
Because he told us. And then my sister finally called it out and said, so he has glioblastoma multiforme. And he's like, yes, grade 4. And I started bawling. Mm-hmm. And he's like, this is why I didn't want to tell you. It is not a death sentence. And I was like, yes, it is. And he's like, you're so young. I don't want you to be scared. And he was like, we're immediately going to start radiation and chemotherapy. And I remember I felt like my life had ended because ever since I married my husband, I just followed him around everywhere. Sorry. And then finally, when he was getting fitted for his radiation mask, they found the tumor had grown back and it was more aggressive. So they needed to go in
And I remember when the doctor came out, he looked defeated, and he had like tears in his eyes. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I took out as much as I could. And this time we were very aggressive. So let's see what happens. And he needs to start chemotherapy within less than 2 weeks. And usually they wait 4 weeks. So not chemotherapy, radiation. Because they're like, the tumor is too aggressive. I knew then that there was, and then after that, he was no longer stable on his feet. He couldn't recognize who was his friend, who loved him. The empathy portion of his part of his brain was gone. And when I would reach out to the doctor, the surgeon, he's like, I wish I'd never done the second surgery, because Rehan is no longer Rehan. He was this angry man, and I don't blame him, But as a caretaker, being on the receiving end, it was very, very difficult.
After, all of the different surgeries, were you his primary caregiver? Did you have additional help, or what was that process like?
Yes, he was very, very open and close with me. I was the only one he could yell at, take out his frustrations. So yes, I was his primary caregiver. I had my mom, more than a mom to him, and she cries every day like she's mourning her child. I feel like my family really stepped up. We took him to every radiation, everything, every scan. My mom was by my side. Whether he was getting a port put in, she would be awake at 4 a.m. I wouldn't even tell her that we have like an appointment the next day. She would just show up. And so it was my mom and I. I didn't even raise my child that year. My niece and my mom raised my son. And I owe them so much. So in November, they saw a huge, massive change in my husband. And they were like, you need help. You can't take care of him by yourself. And our entire building knew by then, because I don't know if you know, glioblastoma patients don't know what they're saying. They don't know how loud they are. They don't know anything. And we lived in New York City. I didn't have a single friend. My friends were just in the media world, and I don't want to tell them. I wanted to hide it, It's kind of like his privacy. Didn't want them to know what he was going through. And he would put on an act for the world. Like, hey, how are you doing? I'm good. I'm great. I'm ready to come back to work. And he was obsessed with work, Amber. Like every day he would write an email like, hey guys, I'm coming back next week. And I would just sit there. And because I was so blunt with him, he would get angry with me. But that's just my personality. And then I started slowly learning, like, being blunt with him isn't the right way. Just entertaining him is the right way. And I sometimes felt like I was being deceitful towards him by just going along with everything. Like, he would ask me to write an email to, like, the GM. He was a good friend of ours, Chad Matthews. And he would be like, oh, Chad, Chad, hey, Rehan's doing good. He's going to come back. But I would call him personally and tell him, like, Rehan's not doing good. And the glial cells are spreading faster than we thought. We went through he was textbook GBM patient. He had the 2 surgeries. He became that angry, person. The beast took over. We moved back to Cincinnati for help. He started having the falls that I read about. He actually had, what is it called? Like, is it not hemorrhaging in the brain? But yes, he fell twice while taking a shower. Like, he would hit his head, right?
Oof, yeah. That happened to my dad as well. Not in the shower, but, like, it's scary.
And then he would walk straight into a wall. And if I tried to help him, he'd be like, I know what I'm doing. They want charge. They want to take over. They want to still be in charge of something because they have no control.
Was he always very stubborn as a person?
Yes.
Okay.
Extremely stubborn.
Yeah, my dad as well. I remember,
really?
Like, there were stories, like, we would be like, okay, like, when he got to the point where he started, like, walking a little wobbly, I was like, Dad, like, you're going to use a walker. And he's like, no, I've got it. I was like, no, you're going to use a walker. And he would literally be like, I've got this. And then he'd fall. And I was like, well, look where we are now. We're in the emergency room because you hit your head on the floor. And I was like, so next time we're not going to do this. And then, like, next time he would do it. And I was like, great, now your finger's broken. And it was more of just, like, it kind of became, like, a joke because it's like he was just always this, like, super stubborn person.
Yes. Like, oh, I have this. I got this. I don't know if it's like, I mean, I think maybe women are like that too, but men especially. If I tell him like, hey, take out the trash, he just won't do it that day. But he would do it anyway. You know what I mean? But if I say it, he's just not going to do it. That was our dynamic as it is. So I got a wheelchair for him. He's like, I'm not going to sit on that. And I'm like, well, it was like the month of Ramadan. And I'm like, I want you to come to dinners. I want people to pray for you. And he wanted to go to the mosque every day. I'm like, well, I want you. And by then he just had tunnel vision from both eyes. Like it was like this. He couldn't even see. He would recognize voices, but he acted like he could. So
he refused to sit on the wheelchair. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. He refused to use a cane, a walker, anything, nothing ever.
Did you admire that at all?
Did I admire that?
Yeah.
I did, because he wanted to keep his dignity. Who doesn't, right? He didn't want to be pitied, which was tough. And then till the end, he was like calling work, texting work. Even when he was like not even lucid, he would ask me, did I call work? He's coming back to work. I'm like, yeah, called him. You going back to work, you know?
Did you ever feel like his attention in the media in relation to his GBM diagnosis, like, you know, I guess like you guys kept it very private and you didn't want to share much, but did you ever have a thought that maybe he would tell people, and that, you know, did you want to tell people just because of how big his presence was? Like, how did that, you know, sort of work with your family dynamic?
In what sense? Like
as far as like sharing it publicly and, you know, making other people aware of what you're going through.
I think it's important to share publicly. I want people to know that it's not easy. It is horrible. And maybe God chose him for a reason, because he was in the public eye. He was the number one guy. And everybody knew he had GBM. A lot of my close friends, his close friends, like knew what I was going through.
Yeah.
And I think we should bring more light to like, it's so difficult as a caregiver, watching them suffer, you suffer, your life being like destroyed. Nobody can understand what you're going through.
How do you think you were able to get through the caretaking process, you know, especially since it was just you and your mom supporting you? But it's obviously super challenging as a wife, but also as a human. So like, what did you do to, you know, get through everything?
I'm not just going to say it was just me and my mom. We were the primary, but I had my sister, I had my nieces, I had my niece, I had my nephews, I had my brother-in-law, my dad. My brothers would fly out all the time. And then I just had a lot of support. I had a lot, you know, the way I got through it was because my family actually understood my side. They saw me suffer. They saw what I was going through. And my Cincinnati community, my Pakistani community here, Indian Pakistani community, they were so supportive. They saw what I was going through. They saw the pain in my life. And I could never have done it without them or my friends. They all knew. And they understood, you know, that Rehan is suffering, but they also knew how I was suffering.
Did you do anything specific during the time to sort of like get your mind off of things, or, you know, like ever take a break, really?
Never. I did everything in my life was about him. Like, I even took a break, and I flew to Saudi Arabia because, you know, we're Muslim. So I went to Mecca and Medina, and I prayed. I begged God, like, please, God, don't make him paralyzed. Don't put him through this, and just somehow show us a miracle. It didn't happen, and he went through everything that I feared. He was paralyzed.
Do you think that knowing the outcome of a GBM diagnosis, or, you know, doing the research that you did that prepare you for anything that you went through?
Absolutely. I think they do a good job of telling you every little detail, because I joined a grief group immediately. It was like, we are the wives of glioblastoma patients.
Okay.
And this is our story. It's on Facebook. There were so many women that were going through the same exact thing. And they were like in Norway or Ireland. And I really connected with them because I felt like nobody could understand what I was going through but them. So it did help me and it did prepare me. But watching it is so traumatic. I wish I didn't know.
Really?
Yeah.
What difference do you think that would have made?
I don't know. I think ignorance is bliss. Yeah.
Biodexa Pharmaceuticals is proud to sponsor the Glioblastoma AKA GBM podcast. Biodexa Pharmaceuticals is a small biotechnology company hoping to make a big difference in the treatment of glioblastoma. Using their proprietary nanotechnology, Biodexa is developing liquid formulations of an investigational drug which can be delivered directly and locally into the tumor via an implanted catheter. This drug has been previously investigated in pediatric patients with brain tumors. Biodexa Pharmaceuticals is currently running a clinical trial in patients with recurrent glioblastoma known as the MAGIC G1 trial. To find out more about the MAGIC trial, visit magictrials.com. Imagine waking up from brain tumor removal surgery knowing that your radiation treatment is already underway. That's how gamma-tile therapy works. At the end of brain tumor removal surgery, the neurosurgeon implants the gamma-tiles where the tumor is most likely to return. So instead of waiting to start daily standard radiation treatments that go for weeks, you get a head start against tumor cells and get back to your life sooner. For operable brain tumors of all types, including glioblastomas, brain metastases, meningiomas, gammatyl therapy is a one-time, targeted radiation treatment with fewer side effects and far less chance of hair loss than external radiation. Gammatyl therapy is tough on tumors and easier on patients and caregivers. Learn more at gammatyl.com. Gammatyl therapy is an FDA-cleared radiation therapy for patients with newly diagnosed malignant brain tumors and recurrent brain tumors. Novacure is pleased to support the Glioblastoma AKA GBM podcast. Novacure strives to extend survival in some of the most aggressive forms of cancer through the development and commercialization of their innovative therapy called Tumor Treating Fields. Novacure partners with the Glioblastoma Research Organization to work together on behalf of patients and their loved ones impacted by GBM. To learn more, visit novacure.com. Rehan was built by a team of patients, caregivers, and medical experts, consisting of neurosurgeons, neuro-oncologists, psycho-oncologists, radiation oncologists, nurse practitioners, and social workers who have devoted their lives to treating and helping glioblastoma patients. For anyone navigating GBM, Rehan offers a wealth of medically vetted, digestible video answers to common questions. Answers are organized into major topics ranging from surgery to radiation to caregiver mental health. Check it out at rehan.com. How was your son coping with all of that during the time of that, through the duration of Rehan's illness?
So we didn't want to tell Rafe, that's our son, what his dad had. So he saw his papers and he Googled it.
Okay.
And he was like, hey, Daddy has glioblastoma. He called it diabloblastoma first. I'm like, yeah, it is a diabloblastoma. But how did he deal with it? He was angry. He was angry at his father. He was missing out on his love that year, because Rehan was so desperate and holding on to life. And it was hard for my son. And there was another side that was telling Rehan not to care about his son or me. And he was very influenced by that. And that was hurting us. And those people don't understand how much they hurt us and hurt my family and hurt my little son. And he's still very angry. But he misses his father. And he hates last year. He doesn't like to think about it. And he's actually wiser than I am. I'll be like, oh, how do you feel? It's been 8 months, Daddy passed away. And he's like, Mommy, Daddy was no longer Daddy after his second surgery. We didn't know him anymore. So, he's so wise. And he's like, I can't be mad about something that I can't control. But he went through his own issues. He had a lot of issues. Like, I remember when he went back to school, I was worried. I have a friend whose mother passed away when she was 17. Her brother was 12. And I reached out to him, like, what's going to happen with my son? Because he doesn't cry or doesn't tell me. Will he beat up somebody at school? She's like, yes, he will. And you know what? 3 weeks in, he hit somebody. Actually gave somebody a black eye, my little sweet Rafe. I got a call from the principal. I was hysterical. And I'm like, his dad passed away in July. And she's like, okay, it makes sense. And I asked him, he called me and he was crying hysterically. And I'm like, Rafe, what happened? And he's like, he hit me with the ball. And I said, and he's like, so I beat him up uncontrollably. I said, why did you do that? And he's like, because he has a normal home and a daddy. As a mother, that hurts, because my son's test started so early and it was unfair. And he watched his dad die. He was there. My husband in the end would always apologize to him and tell him he was sorry for all the times you hurt him. And he would tell him, I'm always going to be around you. I'm going to go on a journey. I'm not going to be here. He was really angry in the beginning for the first couple of months. He saw, family units. And he's like, even when people are divorced, they have their dad's house or their mom's house. I don't have a dad anymore. That was really, really hitting him hard. But I think my brothers did a great job. My youngest brother, he flew out and took him to a Pittsburgh Bengals game because my husband was from Pennsylvania and he's a Pittsburgh fan, Steelers fan. So he was like, hey, we're going to go. And if your dad's team wins, that's because, Daddy wanted them to win. So it was so sweet that my brother did that.
Did they win?
Yeah, the Steelers won.
Amazing.
Yeah, the Bengals didn't win. So my son was a little pissed because he'd become like a Bengals fan living here. And I was like, see, you have to be happy. It was Daddy's team. And it was so sweet that my brother left his kids behind and he came for my son. And my brothers actually call my son, FaceTime him. And my other brother flew out a few times. Both of them have, on their own, alone, just to give him attention, to let him know that we're here. And he's very dependent on my sister and her family as well. And he's obsessed with my mom, of course, It's like a second mom. Yeah. So
How do you feel like the relationship with Rafa has changed since Rehan passed away?
He's just become such a big boy, and it's sad. He had to grow up so fast. Where when I cry, he comforts me. It's so, I feel sad for him that he had to grow up so fast. He grew up really fast. He's very mature for his age. And we have a really good relationship.
That's really special.
Yeah,
they're able to keep that. It's interesting for me, like when my father was sick, like growing up, we didn't have a good relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he became sick, you kind of like forget about all of that. And it was kind of like a little bit opposite. But I think like I obviously, you know, I'm not in the place that your son is, and I didn't lose my father at that young age, but it was still young. But it's like, I think as he gets older, like maybe he'll start to, you know, be less angry and think of all like the positives. I'm sure, you know, they had, you know, 10 great years together. He'll still learn a lot.
Oh God, yeah, because he was his daddy's. Okay, so my husband was funny. He worked for Disney, right? ABC Disney.
Oh, so you know, Rafa must have loved that.
Of course he loved it. So like whenever we went to Disney like 3 times a year, which I hated, but
you hate Disney?
No, I love Disney. Like as soon as you enter, it's like you know, birds chirping, and it's like, you know, you forget your sorrows behind. But trust me, we would go for like a week at a time, where I was like running away.
Okay.
Day 3, I was like, I'm leaving.
What was like your Disney like routine? Like everyone's got like their parks that they go to. What would you guys do?
So we always did everything as a family.
Okay.
We never ever did anything alone.
Okay.
But the cutest thing was my husband would always sign my son up as a Jedi warrior.
Okay.
So there'd be a parade, and my son would be like in the Jedi gear. Okay.
Oh, that's fun.
So it was cute. So my son always felt so special, and he used to tell my son like, "Daddy's gonna make you the biggest star because I can."
Yeah.
I'm at this place. I paved the road, and my son had this like confidence in him that, oh yeah, I'm gonna be this big thing.
Yeah, I'm a Jedi.
That's fine. And he's a Jedi. You know, he used to go make like these lifesavers and all that kind of stuff. So they watched every Marvel movie together. He actually bought him Atari.
What is that?
I know you're too young to understand Atari. That's like back in our days. And
what's Atari?
It's like Sega. Do you know Sega is?
Yeah,
so it's really old school, and they're like really old games, but don't even exist anymore. So he got my son hooked on like Sonic. And I threw his 6th birthday was a Sonic birthday, and my friends are like, "Oh my God, that like takes me back to like the 80s. Like, how does your son know about Sonic?" Because my husband was so close to Rafa that he loved everything Daddy loved. They were like best pals. It's hard for him, but I try to do that now. Like, I'll watch a movie with him. I'm like, let's go throw a football, you know?
What's your favorite thing to do together?
Just watching a movie.
Okay.
Hanging out.
Any particular favorite movies that you guys like?
We love anything Disney.
Okay.
And the weird thing is, we used to watch Coco. Rafa
I've
and
actually never seen that.
Oh my God, you
That's
have
like
to watch it.
One that I haven't seen.
You have to watch it. And it's such a good movie. And we used to watch Beauty and the Beast a lot. So I try to watch very kosher movies, even though he's like 11. Oh, I made him watch Urban Legends recently, and I freaked out my son.
I've never seen that.
You haven't seen it?
I'm really bad.
Old.
I'm really bad.
It's really
with
old.
movies.
You're probably like just born, but it's a really good movie. And I was like, because he's like, "Oh, mommy, I won't watch it like a scary movie." I was like, "Okay, let's start with like a smaller like."
Oh, see, that's
scale.
why I haven't seen it. I can't watch because like I will like. There was one movie I think called Jennifer's Body. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh God, no, I would never watch that.
It's like with a Megan Fox. It's like apparently not even that scary, but I think I was like 11 when it came out. Like probably like, you know, Rafa's age.
Yeah.
And I went to the movies with some friends, and like my friend sat on me, and I was stuck watching the movie, and I slept with the lights on for like 3 months, and just since then I just no scary movies.
No, I understand. So I'm okay with scary movies.
Yeah.
But I freaked him out.
Okay.
And I felt really bad, and he was like, "I need to watch like something
Frozen."
easy. Yeah,
maybe to go to bed.
Yeah, I was like, all right, watch like something easier. But yeah, that's what we do. We just hang out or we talk, and I like to travel with my son. He's an annoying traveler, but it's fun.
Do you guys have any trips planned?
I'm hoping to go to Chicago during my birthday because I just want to get away. I don't want people to know, but now people will know. But that's okay.
It's not airing until May. You're fine.
Oh, it's not. You're good. Okay. Well, I may go. And yes, we always have trips planned. We're either planning a trip to Miami for...
to come visit me, obviously.
Yes, of course. And he'll be like in love with you. He'll be like, oh, mommy always has pretty friends.
That's so funny. So going back to, you know, once Rehan had passed away, in your religion and your faith, I know you had mentioned to me through email, so if I'm botching this, please correct me, that there's a certain period of time that a spouse that has just lost a partner can't do any social activity?
No.
Okay.
It's 4 months and 10 days. It's not solitude. It's just after the sun goes down, you should be at your home.
Okay.
It's only because people point fingers, and you're kind of like a buzzkill. If I went to a party, I'm a widow. Everyone's gonna be like, oh, you know. So there's a lot of wisdom behind it. And back in the days, way back in the days, people would approach a widow because she's very emotional and try to propose to her, and she didn't want to be alone, and she comes with money probably or something, and take advantage of her. So it's more like to get your thoughts together, to get away from everything. I don't think I could have entered a social scene at that time. I went to lunches with my friends alone.
Okay.
But it's not solitude. It's not confinement. We're just supposed to grieve.
Yeah.
And then after those 4 months and 10 days, you're a single woman. I can do whatever I want. And no one can tell me, and no one's allowed to point fingers at me.
Yeah. Did you find that, what was the most surprising thing about your grief process? Obviously, it's still going. You mentioned it was 8 months yesterday, but
so
what did you realize?
So the grief process is so interesting. It is the worst feeling in the entire world. And it's very isolating because nobody can understand it. Only the person that's grieving can understand their own grief. And I feel very alone. Like, obviously, Rehan and I, he was my life partner. He's gone. I'm in my mid-40s. Who wants to be alone at this time? I think it's scary during my grief process. I thought about everything. Like, I'm the man of the house. I was very babied by my dad. He never told me to have a career. So I have a career now. I'm very blessed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My dad always educated us. And he always told me, you never know when you're going to have a bad day. And he was smart. And my grief process was very horrific. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. Like, literally, my body would not move. I felt I was paralyzed. And I couldn't believe he was gone. And that's the worst feeling.
Do you think that, when you mentioned that you had to sort of become man of the house, it's interesting because my mom also sort of had to deal with that same thing too. And it's like, I never thought about this until she told me, a couple months down the road, she's like, I have to pack up the whole apartment now because we're moving. And she's like, I have to do all this, like, we have to drill something in a wall. I mean, we could have called like a person to, like, a contractor to do it, but like she wanted to do it herself. And so, like, what do you feel like was that you've learned through that process of just like learning how to do things? I also think, at least for my mom, like, it was so rewarding for her because she was like, I did this for the first time, and she was like super proud of herself.
Oh yeah. Like, so we moved closer to my mom, and the previous owner had a timer on the water. So one day I was taking a shower and the water just stopped. I'm like, this is so bizarre. So I had to go and figure out how to turn the water back on. And yes, I figured it out. I went through like the papers, and I'm a woman. I never read through anything. He gave me like a list of things I should know. I finally looked at it. I had to download the app. I had to like set the time. I was like, oh my God, I'm not setting any timers on my water. I had to fix the water downstairs, and it was rewarding, but that's when you really, really miss him a lot. Like, man, I wish he was...
Like, this was your job.
Yeah, because if anything was messed up, I would just pick up the phone and be like, Rehan, this happened. Or we lived in Houston, and I would have, like, if a lizard came into my house, I would call Rehan. I'm like, Rehan, there's a lizard here. He'd be like, all right, take a vacuum and just suck it up. Honestly, that's what we would do.
That's crazy.
We would suction it with, like, the vacuum and throw the vacuum outside.
And just that was it for the vacuum.
That's it.
Kept buying a new one.
No, we would just throw out the handheld one.
Oh my God, that's crazy. It's a funny story about like lizards. So like we lived in Miami when I was a kid, and we had a chimney for some reason. Our like townhouse had a chimney because because you need a fireplace in Miami. Yeah. And there was like one winter we had like the fireplace lit, and an iguana like just falls like this big.
Oh my God.
It falls through the chimney. I was like 7 years old. And, like, I'm screaming top of my lungs. I was screaming. And my mom is there, like, screaming as well. And then my dad literally, like, walks over to the fireplace. And, like, we have to, like, it's burning. Like, the fire's lit.
Oh, my God. Really?
No, yeah. Like, the iguana's burning. And the house smells like lizard.
That is the scariest thing ever.
It's crazy. And then so we literally had to, like, my dad goes and he gets, like, a washcloth and is just, like, walking through the house with, like, this 2-foot iguana. Just, like, it's burning. And just, like, walking through.
That is so...
And I was just like, Mom... You're living in an apartment for now on. There's no more chimneys allowed.
No more chimneys, yeah.
That was crazy.
I do fear that, though. Like, what if a bird comes in? What am I going to do? Something just falls through.
Open the window. Fly right out.
I know.
You can give me a call.
I'm such a girl
yeah.
that I didn't know how to do any of these little things. Like, I don't know how to hammer something into the wall. Like, I was always afraid. And now I'm learning. I have to put, I move my furniture. I do things myself. I never, ever took out the trash. I do that, of course. I had a really nice neighbor until he just moved recently. He used to bring my trash cans back up for me, which is so kind of him because he knew my situation.
Yeah.
But my husband was big on, like, trash is my thing. So, when you start doing everything, and then especially for your son, like, there's no days where I get to say, I want to sleep in and Rehan, take Rafi to school. No, I have to wake up. I have to make sure my son gets to school. I have to make sure he's well fed. It's so different now.
How would you describe his life without him now?
It's sad. There's a void. There's a sense of peace that I believe he's in heaven. And I think whatever he wanted to accomplish in this life, he did.
That was actually my next question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ask me.
I was like I written down. I like to, just like that, like not read off like verbatim, but I was going to ask, is there a certain legacy that he wanted to leave behind? And do you think that he did that?
Absolutely. So when he was right before his third surgery, we didn't want it. Everybody, like my brothers, everyone, they were like, use your power of attorney card. Somebody was actually telling him that we had given up on him. So he's like, oh, you guys gave up on me. Other people aren't. And I was like, no, we have not given up on you. And I called up all the doctors. I called the Henry Ford clinic. I called Duke. I called MD Anderson. I called Mayo Clinic. You name it. They all said, do not do the surgery. This is bad. And just take him home. He had the surgery. He was paralyzed. But right before I was like, oh, you've never been on Being Sadaf. So I'm going to interview you. And I said, what is it like to be a Peabody Award winner? Because that's the highest prestige as a journalist you can achieve. And he received that in 2010 while he was working in Chicago. And he's like, that's not the only award I've won. I'm like, yes, you won News Director of the Year award in Houston. He's like, no, I won an Emmy. I'm like, you won an Emmy? And he's like, yeah, I've won an Emmy. I didn't know that at the time. He knew that he was nominated for an Emmy.
Oh, interesting.
So the 2021 Emmys are announced in 2022.
Right.
The craziest thing is, on the eve of his birthday, on the 8th, it was the New York City Emmy Awards, and he won.
Oh my goodness.
At 12 o'clock. After 12 o'clock. It was his birthday, October 9th.
Wow.
And I had just posted, like, happy birthday, Rehan, and all this crazy stuff, my sad grief stuff. And his, the GM calls me, and she's like, Sadaf, he won an Emmy. And I just started crying. She was emotional. And yes, I believe he achieved everything. He left a great legacy behind. And I think he's such a great role model that I want to follow in his footsteps. Like, when you leave this world, you want to leave a good impression and a great legacy behind.
What do you feel like is the, legacy you're trying to leave behind? Maybe you also haven't figured it out yet too, which that's okay.
I think my legacy will be like, I don't know what it is, but I'm very bold and I'm very outgoing. I still stop myself because I want to give my parents respect. Don't want them to be ashamed of me, but I want other, like, South Asian women to know that we're the same. We're American. We have the same needs. We have the same wants. We have the same goals. And don't fall into family pressure, and do what you want to do, because that's what my husband did. He didn't care. He did whatever he wanted to do. I used to call myself the third wife. He was married to his work, his boss, then me. I think it's very important to take care of yourself, and I was very proud of him. In the beginning, when you're married, you're mad, but at the end, when I saw him, I was so happy for him. He did exactly what he wanted to do.
That's really, I think, a good lesson a lot of people should take away. And I think that's like something that you don't necessarily always think about. And it's good to be reminded. I always I love having a podcast because, like, there's all these, like, pretty significant, like, statements like that people will make that I just, like, don't think about. And then it's, like, nice to have, like, these, like, reminders that pop up. And I'm like, I should be, like, a little more mindful of, like, all these things. So I'm happy you shared that. And I think people will enjoy listening to that too.
Thank you.
And so how do you feel like you continue to honor Rehan or, like, remember him to this day?
I think by bringing attention to GBM. He would have wanted that. He would really want me to be vocal, to help others out, and to make them understand that it's not easy. What he went through, he did with a smile. Not gonna lie. He never complained. He never said, ow, ouch, nothing, ever. And he would want me to tell everybody that it is a beast. It takes over your mind. You have no control. And you take it out on the people that love you the most. And that's okay, because I feel like he loved me the most. So it's okay. And he would want me to tell my story. And he said that, actually. A few weeks before his surgery, he said, hey, I want you to write a book
I'm like, oh, you don't want me to do that. And he's like, yes, I do. And I'm like, well, I'll have to mention you. And he said, that's fine. I won't be around. That really hurt me. And I said, no, I'd rather have you around. But yes, he would want me to continue bringing awareness. And I love what you do. And I follow you so religiously because you're so young and you've come so far. I'm in awe of what you do. I wish I could do half of what you do. But if you ever need help or in any way, like, you know, I'm always here.
Thank you. Well, you're here today and you're sharing your story, and I'm very thankful you're able to come on the show. This is coming from like a caregiver's perspective. Let's say with holidays approaching or any particular anniversaries, birthdays, how can you manage your emotions being that things feel a little bit different?
Valentine's Day passed. When Rehan was alive, I never cared.
Okay.
Not gonna lie. We would joke around and say happy Hallmark holiday, right? Mm-hmm. To each other. And but this year I was lonely. I was alone. I felt, wow, I don't have anyone that really cares in that way. It's very difficult. And you just go in your own little shell. And my family knows those are the days they don't really talk to me, and they understand.
Yeah. Do you find more peace in the solitude?
Yes. Because I just want to get through the day.
Right.
I just want to be over.
When discussing with, like, you know, with your son, have you ever cried talking to him about Rehan? Or
my God, my poor son is so traumatized. Okay. I cry all the time. He has to come and hug me and like comfort me, and I feel like such a terrible mom. But yes, he understands. He's like, and he's so good. My mom will show up because she knows my daughter's sad, and he calls my mom too. He's like, Mom, my mommy is sleeping. And my mom's like, I'm her mother. I'm going to go upstairs to her room. He's like, no, she is sleeping. So he's very protective of me. Very. And he is my ease.
Yeah.
God gave me a good son.
I think it's okay to cry in front of your kids. Like, I don't, you know, I tell my mom this too, because like she never cried in front of me, and like she was just never, even like I remember the day that I flew home, and like the day that my dad passed away, I was on a flight. Like I was telling you before we started recording, I landed, I go to my mom's room, I start like sobbing, and she was just like there, and I was like, you should be crying. But she was always just like solid, and like I think like eventually like even like it took her months to cry in front of me, and then she did, and I was like, it's okay, like you're human, like it happens.
So my son wanted to be strong for me. It was really sad because I don't remember the first day, like when Rehan passed away. I don't remember it at all. My friends were like, we all came to see you. I don't remember. The day of his funeral, I will never forget this. He was taking a shower and I stood right outside. I want to cry a lot. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
It's okay.
I heard him sobbing and crying so hysterically that it pierces my soul even now. Every night when I go to bed, I think of how much pain we brought upon my son. When he came out of the shower, he had a smile on his face. And I'm like, Rafe, were you crying? And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, I heard you. So he tries to mask it. Mm-hmm. It's like he's the adult in the situation. And that's painful for me. A lot of my friends yell at me like, be the adult. Don't let him be the adult. And right away, he took on that role. And I think that's big. He's a good kid. And I think we didn't have time to process. I think with GBM, it's one of the worst types of cancer. You're so stressed and you're always on the go. There's always, every day it's like a new drama that you don't get to process the fact that, hey, this person is dying of GBM. It's like your life is just like crazy. Yeah. And there's way too many people involved. So I think we're processing it now.
Well, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. And it was such a pleasure to meet you. And
thank you.
I'm really thankful that we got to meet finally after months and months of, you know, sarcastic Instagram DMs.
Yes. And I apologize.
No,
I'm just very blunt.
I'm just totally kidding. That was fun. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much for your organization and bringing light to GBM, because people don't know about it. And I'm so excited you had this podcast. And thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Absolutely.
That's it for this week's show. Thank you so much for tuning in again to another episode of Glioblastoma AKA GBM. To get in touch with our organization, visit us online at gbmresearch.org or visit us on Instagram or Facebook at Glioblastoma Research. Visit us on Twitter at glioblastoma.org or visit us on LinkedIn at Glioblastoma Research Organization. To make a donation to the organization, which is fully tax deductible, visit us online at gbmresearch.org, where you can designate your donation in honor of someone or find other methods that you can make a donation with. Thank you again for supporting us, for supporting the show, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome to another deep dive with Stash Strong. Today, let's talk about this episode with Sadaf. How did you feel about it?
It resonated with me in terms of her being a caregiver. Again, I personally hated that term because I was a brother, right? Like it was more for me verbiage, right? Yeah. I always said I'm his brother. He would do the same for me. But from the caregiver lens, when she said caregivers need support too, that hit me, right? Like that genuinely, I felt that. It's kind of a catch-22 because you know the task at hand is your loved one fighting an incurable disease, but caregivers shoulder a lot.
Yeah.
And I think hearing her say like caregivers need support too, and again, she's a mother, has a young son, her husband going through it, family, right? Caregivers need support too, and I think it's something that if you're listening to this and you're a caregiver, you need to find that support, right? And know that you cannot shoulder everything and be strong for your loved one all the time.
How do you feel now, a couple years into Stash Strong and having all these different caregivers and family members share their stories, but that, like we said in prior, episodes, that this wasn't necessarily the common norm to be able to share your story and to get external support. So how has it been for you now with Stash Strong to hear all these different stories all the time? Like, how has that helped your process?
Yeah, I think you realize what people need, which, from our standpoint, we're advocating for the entire picture, right? There's a patient, there's a caregiver, there's a loved one, there's plenty of facets and responsibilities that people shoulder and go through. So again, our family, right, my parents, my sister and I, we were caregivers. There was no other caregiver for GJ outside of medical professionals, right? So I didn't know many caregivers in the early days. And now we're connecting with so many people who, especially from my angle, I connect with patients all the time, right? I can help them navigate. I can help them, from, again, being very close to it. I never had GBM.
Yeah.
A caregiver calls and immediately a different connection exists because I know what they're going through, right? And I think that's something that always is separating Stash Strong. I changed my brother's Optune, right? I drove him to, radiation appointments, right? We helped put pills in the bottle for chemo and days on and off, right? Like I've seen the lowest lows of GBM as a caregiver. So when someone is going through that and calls or is asking for help, like I can point them in directions, right? I can connect them with other caregivers in this network, which I also think is a really important thing of organizations like ours, where, again, I could have called the one person maybe I knew early on that was going through this and talked with them, and then the conversation's done. We have the ability, whether it's through our voice and direct contact or our social media platforms, where they can take 20 minutes and immediately find multiple people who have a similar story.
That know exactly what they're going
through. What they're going through. Like, how powerful is that?
It's crazy. Do you think that, looking back on your experience also with glioblastoma, what do you wish you had as a caregiver?
Gosh, number one, a silver bullet. Obviously not realistic in the current realm. But for me, I think it would have helped just to know that I was doing well, right? Like, again, in the beginning of putting Optune is a really good example, right? It's tangible of what we did and shaving his head. Like, it was like a canvas to me. Like, I have no artistic abilities, and I was Picasso, right? Like, I need to make sure that thing was perfect, right angles, you're like cutting out little pieces, going around, cuts and bruises that were happening on his head. And sometimes, like, we do that. We got to a point where we crushed it in 15 minutes, right? We got good at it, but I think about like, oh, did I put this in the wrong placement? Was I on A or B day? You talk to enough people, it's like, you're doing well, right? You're doing everything you can as a accountant, right? Like, I was a CPA in Manhattan working in consulting. I wasn't a medical professional. So I think the ability, if I look at and again, I was also I was 25 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I still am. I was a kid, right? Like, I was new to the city and I'm doing this for my brother, my big brother, who always did that for me, right? In our relationship. So I think just having someone tell you, and again, if you're listening to this and you're a caregiver, you're crushing it, right? Like, I think it's so important to hear because you're doing so much that isn't seen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the thing. Your loved one knows it, and I promise you they appreciate it, right? Like, my brother was very open with at least letting me know, like, he appreciated it in his own way, right? He wasn't an open person in that regard, but like, we fist bumped at the end of each. It was just our unspoken way to say like thank you. But caregivers are doing so much. They also need to make sure they're doing things for themselves and they're finding support.
I think it's also important for like anyone out there that's listening that like we're proud of them no matter what situation they are as far as glioblastoma. Like if even just getting through this and dealing with this on a daily basis, like you are doing great.
Yeah.
And like we support you and we're here for you because it's not easy. And the fact that you're able to continue doing this, I think it's a lot. So.
Even the bare minimum, right? The small, even just
it's
being
still
there,
a lot.
it's
I feel
so
like there's
much.
no bare minimum in this situation. Like everything you do is a lot, and it's all important, and it's all valid, and like it's not easy.
It's not.
So.
And you're needed.
Yeah.
And you're a vital piece to your loved one's success and longevity. And again, just don't ever beat yourself up.
Great advice. Thank you, Colin. Thank you for joining us on another deep dive with Stash Strong.